All right. Welcome, everyone, to our session on a journey in OER, growing awareness, discovery, and use of OER at the University of Calgary. My name is Sarah Adams. I am the Open Education Librarian at Libraries and Cultural Resources.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is James Murphy, and I'm a Learning and Engagement Librarian with Libraries and Cultural Resources at the University of Calgary. Before we start our session today, we would like to acknowledge that we are located on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. So in this session, we're going to cover three broad learning outcomes. First, understand our journey at the University of Calgary and in our libraries in advocacy for OER. Secondly, consider some of the initiatives or activities or resources that have been created that you might be interested in adopting at your own institution. And then thirdly, identifying ways to potentially engage with or support campus partners or other OER advocates at your campus. We're going to look at a little bit of a timeline here just to explore where we've come. Leading back almost 10 years, and certainly we'll be focusing more on the recent years, but it's important to see where this journey has started. And definitely, as we'll see, there's been fits and starts at our institution, and we'll touch on those in a little bit more detail. So starting back in 2013, there was a memo sent out to all academic staff on the costs for students for learning materials. 2016, the first textbook broke AB, and AB standing for Alberta, was contributed to by our Students' Union. 2017 saw our first LibGuide or research guide on OER. 2020, funding was established through the Students' Union. I'll talk about that more in detail to specifically fund OER-related initiatives. 2018, the Open Education Alberta group was formed representing institutions across the province. And since 2017, a couple of other things. So pilot grant program, which I'll talk about in more detail. Our first OER was published in 2020. Last year in 2021, there was an open education working group formed within our library. And then last summer, we piloted our OER finding service and our first OER student librarian position, which we've had this summer and last summer, 2021. And really the goal around that service is to make it as easy as possible for instructors and faculty to adopt or use an OER in their course. The barriers that we've encountered, and I'm sure you may be able to relate to some or all, progress has been sporadic. In Alberta, we suffer from a lack of provincial support for funding and infrastructure. We often look jealously to our neighbors in British Columbia and also in Ontario, and are working towards advocacy towards the provincial government to maybe create some funding in the future. OER work has often been in addition to others' roles and responsibilities, sort of off the side of the desk until last year. All the associated workload and burnout issues associated with the pandemic. As we all know, awareness in OER is still growing. And then another issue is the extent and use of OER in courses and in departments can be sometimes hard to pin down, as it's often siloed. Certainly one of the key successes that we found at our university is finding the right partners to work with. And in the libraries, we provide expertise in resources, resource finding, faculty connections, hosting infrastructure. The Students' Union has been an absolute champion over the last few years as far as advocacy, especially towards students, building awareness, collaborating on lots of projects, and even funding particular OER initiatives. Our Teaching and Learning Institute has been involved in OER as well, including grant funding, creating opportunities for learning and teaching, and then building community and projects around open education. There are other potential collaborators. There are OER champions at all campuses. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find who they are and connect with them, but it's useful to get them involved in events or encouraging their colleagues to become more aware of OER. Leadership, certainly when it comes to funding decisions and awareness building at the higher levels. And those are a few other collaborator options. So coming back to 2017, there was a pilot funding project that launched over that year to provide grant funds of up to $4,000, and instructors and faculty could apply. There were 10 grants awarded and $40,000 in funding. And so the student savings per that semester was $106,000. And that really kind of got some momentum going at that time and connected with some of those OER champions across our campus. A few years later, in the last 2 years, there's been 2 new big initiatives that have happened that have added a lot of momentum to these initiatives. The Taylor Institute, which provides grant funding, added an OER stream for their grants, and $500,000 was provided. And this was provided by the Students' Union. They have grant funding every year, quality money they call it, for particular student initiatives that would improve the student experience. So $500,000 was set aside starting last year for OER adaptation and creation. Those have just been getting underway recently. And then through that Students' Union funding as well, in the library, we were able to create a new OER finding service and student librarian positions over the last 2 summers. So that was almost $24,000. And that allowed us to launch our OER finding service, where the goal is really to make it as easy as possible for faculty or instructors to adopt or consider using OER, to save them time and make it as simple as possible. In connecting with instructors, we relied on a Students' Union survey, which was done last year, saying that 85% of undergraduate students say that the cost of required course materials is a source of stress or hardship, and that many chose not to purchase assigned course materials at all, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. So we use this data, this local data, in connecting with instructors to just convey the importance of considering alternative options to their traditional course materials. The student librarian and this OER finding service has reviewed courses across the campus, finding that almost 60% were using a required textbook, 34% was using the library or recommended materials, not required, and about 7% were using OER. So we did that study last summer just to get a sense of where we were at as far as OER adoption. And that helped us move forward as we launched the service. From outreach, we managed to achieve about $156,000 in projected student savings from the instructors who adopted an OER or used an OER in their courses last summer. So we found that to be quite significant, and Students' Union were happy to hear that we had that impact in just the first summer. And then just to look at some of the data. So this is our OER research guide. And as I mentioned, it was started in 2017. But right around when we launched the OER finding service in spring of 2021, there was a real increase in views. And so we saw that as a good indication of connecting with and good outreach as far as promoting the service and promoting OER generally. All right, so from here, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to look at a little bit more recent over the last year or two, what's been happening.
Thank you, James, for chatting about where we've been. I'm now going to chat about where we're going. So in terms of our past success and collaboration with our partners, this has led to the development of a new open education librarian position to continue our path forward. And so in my role, I'm really focusing on growing an OER program at the university. So today on this roadmap, I'm going to cover the first 6, but I did want to mention our new open education community of practice, as well as our textbook broke campaign that we just ran this past month. So in terms of our teaching and learning grants, this was the first year where the OER area of focus funding was awarded to 6 OER projects in a wide variety of disciplines. One bit of feedback that we did receive was that some additional questions and considerations would be helpful to help guide some of the proposals in terms of how to think differently about OER projects, especially around sustainability. So we've introduced that for this new round that will be awarded in 2023. And so I'm interested to see what kind of impact that will have. Next, we went into our second summer for open education and OER student librarian, who supported the continuation of our OER finding service, as well as helped to develop an OER by discipline guide, which would act as a second option for faculty to find OER easily. So in terms of our OER finding service, we knew we wanted to expand it a little bit further because when lists were curated last summer for faculty, there was a fair bit of open access materials also within those lists. And so in order to help conversations around the differences between open access and OER, we rebranded the name to be the Open Course Materials Matching Service, or OCOMS for short. And this is supported by our OER support team rather than embedded into the subject librarian role. And so because of that, it's very important within this service that we have clear communication with our subject librarians about what is going on within their faculty and who is interested in OER, so that they're aware of what's going on, and also letting us have a means for collaborating on next steps. Or if OER is of interest. So with each subject librarian, I kind of have a different approach depending on their preferences, which I'm of course happy to do. Next, we've also developed a research guide and a request form to help streamline both the informational aspect and the requests coming in so that we can ensure that we're getting kind of the information that we need to really make a targeted search. So far, between July and August this summer, we had 8 search requests that we're still waiting to receive feedback on. But one instructor has indicated that they're looking at potentially adopting for next year. And another has indicated that they're using some of the OER that was curated as activities within the classroom this year. Again, we did find that there were some barriers to adoption. So of course, burnout is still a major factor. As well as transitioning again, but this time to in-person teaching just this past September. And then timing again is another issue, but we're hoping because the service is now ongoing that we'll get a nicer flow for getting these requests in and having better timing for faculty to adopt OER. Now, the second project the student librarian worked on was an OER by discipline guide, where we curated OERs based on other similar guides across Canada and really tailored it to our institutional structure so that faculty can easily find OER within their areas. Now, since it was made public in June, we've had 816 page views, and the majority of those have come through direct links that were most likely from our outreach that we did in our various promotional materials and emails, which is a really good sign that people are paying attention to those. And so it means that, it's a good thing to continue in the future. And then it's also nice to see that we're being found on Google. Now, in terms of coming in as the open education librarian, I know that our library staff are really great partners and in connecting with faculty, departments, and students, just as I'm sure they are at your own institutions. But of course, everyone has different levels of comfort and knowledge around OER, so it was important to me to make sure that I'm supporting the library staff by providing training, communication, and teaching and learning resources. So I've done this in two ways, primarily for now, through an internal library guide that they can turn to, as well as training sessions during our training Tuesdays. And then I've also, of course, had one-on-one chats with them. Now, in terms of outreach and communication, our subject librarians are the way to outreach to faculties and departments in their disciplines. And so I provide communication resources about what's going on in OER and what services we can provide in a variety of formats, depending on what their communication pathways are to those faculties and departments, which I have found to be quite effective. And then I've also been working with our media and communications team to really collaborate around our outreach and brainstorm ideas together, because two minds together is always a little bit more creative than one. And so with our social media posts, we've been really focusing on two areas. So the first is knowledge growth, of course. So what are OERs? What is open licensing? Those sorts of posts, as well as about our workshops and various events. And so this two-pronged approach seems to work quite well. And we do get an uptick in workshop registrations through it. So lastly, I wanted to highlight an exploration I'm doing into OER discovery. We use Ex Libris, so Primo is our library catalog, and then we also have Alma community collections available to us. But I have done a scan and found that there's a lack of active OER collections, at least on our side. And we also are quite limited in terms of our keyword searches. So in discussions with collections, this didn't seem necessarily like an approach that maybe we want to take at the moment. So I've decided to switch gears a little bit and decided to develop an OER collection housed within our digital collections repository, which is based in Cortex. And the nice thing about this is that it's linked directly to our library catalog that will allow our faculty to be able to search within there. Next, I developed our own metadata profile based on developed standards, and I'm still assessing this. But I've based it on Spark's OER metadata Rosetta Stone, as well as UBC's OER collection. And so that helps frame it a little bit more around the Canadian perspective by looking at both of those together. And then another benefit is that we'll really be able to curate this collection based on our institutional interests and needs, and then look perhaps at the future of developing this and make it a little bit more of a broader focus. So now looking ahead at our current and future goals, of course, OER awareness, I think for all of us is always a really important piece that we just need to continue. And so through that, I think continuing and growing partnerships is really important. I find that our student union, they're such great voices for pushing OER initiatives through, and our administration really listens to them. And so they're really key partners, as well as our Teaching and Learning Institute. But of course, I want to grow this more and connect with people more across campus. Of course, putting the OER collection actually into place and making it live so that people can go and search is also a top priority. And it was definitely something of interest that came out of our first Open Education Community of Practice meeting. And then we also want to focus on OER awards and incentives, including tenure and promotion, as those are really important pieces to help bring more OER adoption and development. And then lastly, focusing on a ZTC, or Zero Textbook Cost Identifier. Our student union is currently looking into this, and they know that I'm here to support them in anything they may need for that. And I'm hoping that soon that we can put this in place on our campus as well, like many others have. So thank you for attending our session. You are welcome to contact us. We have a general OER support team email
there, as well as our own personal emails. Following this session, you will have access to a document with a bunch of the OER resources we have mentioned here, but of course you can get in contact with us if anything is missing. And now I will leave you to ask your questions. Thank you for listening and have a great day.